for some reason, creative industry growth has kind of disproportionately benefited the privileged. Now, what's really interesting about that is when I first came up with the concept and decided that I was going to develop it, I'm one of those people that, as you know, I go straight out and quite public. I like to be completely transparent with it. And I also believe that if you go publicly, A, you've got accountability, and B, I'm a huge believer in collaboration. So I wanted to see who would come forward and say, okay, I'm already in this space, or have you thought about this, or let me connect you to. And that's what wonderfully happens in our industry all the time. And I love that about us. But what was really interesting is I did a blog post which said PR is posh and privileged, because actually, and it was a deliberately contentious headline.
Yep.
The best thing was I knew I was onto a winner, because out came crawling all these people, and I'm afraid to say, Ben, they were mainly white, middle-aged, privileged men who told me that I was wrong and there wasn't a problem.
Hello and welcome to the Good Journeys podcast with Second Mountain. I'm your host, Ben Veal, founder of Second Mountain, Meaningful Comms for a Brave New World. And this is the show that shines a spotlight on inspiring people and their inspired stories. You can join in the conversation with us on social media using the hashtag GoodJourneysPod. And you can also find each and every episode in full over at our YouTube channel. Just search for @SecondMountainComms. Joining me on today's show is my very special guest, Sarah Waddington CBE. Sarah is a social mobility activist, chartered PR practitioner, and a highly experienced management consultant. With over 20 years' experience in helping organisations to articulate their purpose, create value, and deliver social impact, Sarah really is a pioneer of best practice. Her CBE was awarded in June 2021 for services to public relations and the voluntary sectors, and she has also been awarded the CIPR's Sir Stephen Tallents Medal for Exceptional Achievement in PR. A strong advocate of accountable leadership and women in business, Sarah is a past CIPR president, a PRCA fellow, and strongly believes in helping young talent break through. Alongside her husband, Stephen Waddington, she co-founded Socially Mobile in 2020 with the aim of improving social mobility within the public relations industry. There's a lot there. Sarah, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, you're very welcome. There's so much to talk about, really. You've just done so much in your career, but what I want to do is kicking off with Socially Mobile. So what I'd love you to do is tell our listeners about what the story is behind this community interest group that you founded, and what are some of the barriers that are holding people back from entering the PR industry right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking me about that. This is a real passion project for Stephen and I. And of course, we kind of run it to the side of our main business, but it's really important to us. And basically, the concept came to me while I was still president of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations back in 2018. I was reading all kinds of industry reports, and that included the State of the Profession report from the CIPR and the PRCA census, and just general reports out there. And it was really clear that a couple of things. So we weren't serving our ethnic minority colleagues very well. There wasn't very much opportunity for them to progress. But actually, what was really interesting me, because of my background, was that we were really badly serving and not catering for almost at all working class people, so people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And I was just quite fascinated by this, and I spoke to a number of different people about it, and spoke to a couple of industry bodies as well to see whether there was something that might be interested in them looking at and perhaps creating an intervention. Now, as often the case, the bodies are very busy. They've got limited resources. So I didn't get any pickup, but I was fired up by that point, and was just determined that we had to do better. And if no one else was going to do it, that obviously that was going to have to fall to me, because I just get to be in my bonnet. And that was it, basically. And what was really standing out to me is that, we talk on this very lofty fashion about PR representing the publics that we serve, but clearly it's not something that we've been doing. And actually the PR industry is like a couple of other industries, including journalism. We are unusual. So if you look at figures from the Sutton Trust and the PRCA census, you've got 7% of the UK population who's attended fee-paying schools. And in PR, that figure rises to 21%. So that's really quite unusual. And then I also looked at the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre report. And I'm just reminding myself of the figure on here, actually. I just had jumped onto another tab. And that said that the UK creative industries were underrepresented, or we are underrepresented, by 250,000 working class people. And now we extrapolated that, and we believe that in PR, that's probably 13,500. And for some reason, creative industry growth has kind of disproportionately benefited the privileged. Now, what's really interesting about that is when I first came up with the concept and decided that I was going to develop it, I'm one of those people that, as you know, I go straight out and quite public. I like to be completely transparent with it. And I also believe that if you go publicly, A, you've got accountability, and B, I'm a huge believer in collaboration. So I wanted to see who would come forward and say, okay, I'm already in this space, or have you thought about this, or let me connect you to. And that's what wonderfully happens in our industry all the time. And I love that about us. But what was really interesting is I did a blog post which said PR is posh and privileged, because actually, and it was a deliberately contentious headline.
Yep.
The best thing was I knew I was onto a winner, because out came crawling all these people. And I'm afraid to say, Ben, they were mainly white, middle-aged, privileged men who told me that I was wrong and there wasn't a problem. At which point I just thought, I doubled down and was like, I'm not even going to get into this tit for tat argument. The data's there. I believe in a data-led approach, and we just crack on. And ultimately, that's how Socially Mobile was born. And it took quite a long time to come to fruition. So it took, a good 2 years in the development. We changed the approach. So originally, people might not be aware, we tried to register it as a charity. Now, Charity Commission took ages. They've got a very, very long backlog. But when they finally came back to us, they said actually they didn't think it was appropriate, because actually PR was quite an affluent profession, so there wasn't a problem, which kind of completely missed the point I was making.
Yeah,
because I was a bit like, well, it can be, but you've got to get into the industry first to make it work for you. But it was great, because actually at that point, we'd been thinking what we would do is create this charity, we'd fundraise, and people would be able to find a program they wanted to go and do to train upon. And we would, create, there'd be like a bursary. So we'd provide some commitment towards that, and that would go direct to the establishment. But actually, there's a huge amount of governance issues with that. There's a huge amount of admin, and there's a huge burden on the fundraising. So it gave us really good pause for thought, and it meant we came up with something that we believe has been much better, and we'll have an impact report to publish at the start of next year, which hopefully proves that position. And ultimately, we decided that in order to have control, to be able to scale, to make it sustainable, we would create a community interest company, and we would develop the syllabus. Be a 10-line online independent learning course, so people could fit it around their commitments. And it would be very specifically designed to move people with tactical experience into a strategic role, so they could increase their earning potential. And that's where that was born, really, because we could see that access was limited. Once people were in, they weren't getting up the next rung of the career ladder. And it's interesting, because you may have seen that just recently we've had a class pay gap day, and that suggests that working class people lose around, I think it was 7k, I'd have to go and check, but it's a significant amount. And like from the 14th of November onwards, they basically say that working class people effectively work for free compared to their more privileged peers, which is just shocking, really shocking.
Which is all feeding, of course, into the cost of living crisis, isn't it? I saw the report in PR Week, specifically about the amount of people that will have to look beyond PR to different careers due to earning potential. It's just,
people are having to make some really difficult decisions. So you can see them making different childcare decisions, and perhaps that might mean reducing working hours, which is often something people don't want to do. You shouldn't have to choose between, working full time and your kids. If we had a proper system in place, delivered by government and implemented by a state, we wouldn't be in that position. But unfortunately, we don't. And the Socially Mobile survey that we published showed that people are looking at second jobs. They're asking for promotions, or looking for pay rises. Some businesses are doing that, some aren't. And I do have sympathy for bosses because, we've just had the pandemic. Best will in the world, a lot of agencies and a lot of teams will not have a lot of money in the coffers. That was a very difficult period that people haven't completely bounced back from. We're now entering a recession which looks set to go through at least all of 2023. It's challenging circumstances for everyone, but ultimately Socially Mobile as a private intervention to deal with the fact that we need to be more diverse and inclusive as an industry, and we're open to all. If you've got 2 years of experience, that's all you need to demonstrate. You can get a pay place at 695, and you're helping make the CIC sustainable and help somebody else along. And then, like I say, we offer these fully funded places to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but also our minority ethnic peers, those with disabilities, LGBTQ plus practitioners, and women returners, because there's not a huge amount out there for them. And like I say, the opportunities aren't really there, and you can see it. And one group that's particularly badly served, if you have a look, are those people with disabilities. I couldn't believe it when I was first looking and scoping out and saying, okay, who has what, just as part of my natural business planning. When you look in this industry, if you look around, and I know there's a huge number of disabilities, some visible, some none, and that includes neurodiversity, but there's just nothing for these people, and it's hugely unfair. They've already got barriers, and they already have higher costs month on month. And my view is we've just got to do better. And this is where Stephen and I land. We're in a position now that we can do a bit more because we've got to a point in our career where we're able to, and it sits well with us, and it's important to us, and we're just glad it's making a meaningful difference, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the industry response been like to Socially Mobile so far since you launched?
It's been great. So outside of that spitting of feathers and throwing of dummies from our learned friends, outside of that, it's been brilliant. So Socially Mobile only works because it's a collaboration from some of the finest minds in PR, and I will never stop being grateful to everybody who's involved. So we have a generous group of volunteer assessors led by Ben Veal, who they look at what happens is when we get an application in, they're all anonymized immediately by our program leader. And the ones who are applying for fully funded places, their applications go to a committee, and they look at them and just see if they fit the criteria to be able to get on the course. So we don't know anybody until they come to the welcome session when we first meet everybody, and that's lovely. And then we have all the people who gave the time to develop the content, of which there are many. And like I say, these are guys who don't need to do this, but have, years of experience, hugely talented and knowledgeable, and again, have shared their time to help us develop this. And then we have all the people who do the marking. And, like I say, it's a real team effort. It takes every single one of them to make this work. And what I always just really makes me feel great when I see the students engage with the people who are involved on social and at the graduation, because we do an in-person graduation.
Yeah.
And, just the warmth with which they're received and how they're able to develop their network from it. And we all know that actually one of the most valuable things you can have in business is a network. And often if you're working class, you don't. I remember first starting to volunteer with the CIPR, I'm from a single parent background, got a council grant to go to uni. I found the cost of going to London to volunteer prohibitive, and it was difficult. So with CIPR expenses at the time, you had to put them in, and then you might get paid by a check 2 or 3 months later. Now they've rectified all that, but that was challenging for me. And you've got to remember that there are all these kind of barriers, and you don't necessarily know people like people who work in a big city do, or you work in a big agency do. And so I'm glad that it's working across a number of aspects. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So you mentioned Stephen Veal in passing. So I wanted to kind of come on to that. That you recently announced that you're joining, I guess, the family business.
Yeah.
So working alongside your husband as a director of WADS Inc. So I have a couple of questions on that. The first is, what led to you making that decision at this point in your career? And the second, the one I'm really intrigued by, how do you and your husband, both of whom are very well respected in the industry, both of whom clearly lead very busy lives, how have you managed to successfully balance and separate your work and home life when you're working so closely together in an industry that you're so passionate about?
He's under the patio. That's where he is.
Okay.
What it is our personal relationship developed from our working one. When we first met, I think it was through the CIPR, and we got on really, really well. And there was an immediate intellectual spark, if I can call it that. The reason, let's start with why I joined Waddington CBE. Well, I'd run management PR and marketing consultancy called Astute.work for, I was going to say 9, but it was 13 years. And I loved it. And we did great work developing really great clients and their social impact and purpose. And it was and I had a great team and it was wonderful. But I had most latterly developed the management consultancy part of the business. And that's where my time and focus was. And I'd done an awful lot of personal development. So I've recently completed my certificate in company direction. I've done a number of courses, including my non-exec director training at the stock exchange, done a couple of online courses with online courses at Oxford Side and Cambridge Judge, which is where the idea for doing the same approach for Socially Mobile came from.
You don't stop, really, do you?
I sometimes wonder what is wrong with me. No, but what it is? It's what keeps me ticking. I'm fascinated, and I want to know, and I want to be as good as I can possibly be, and then I want to pass that on. And this had been bit by bit over time, because obviously we've got a big family too. But I'd realised that actually more and more I was spending more time on the management side of the consultancy side of the business, and that's what I loved. And it was a kind of bizarre kind of parallel with Waddington CBE. So obviously it's a professional advisory firm. He works specifically with creative industries, and I was doing that in some respects. And I was also doing the network in the wider business marketplace. So we took the decision, and I think I was also ready for a change. You know what? I love the job, but you suddenly realise the pandemic changed a lot of things. I had time to think towards the end. We'd had a very busy pandemic, but also my son was diagnosed with epilepsy. My ex was quite poorly. I got COVID very badly twice, and I'm normally, there's nothing hits me. Like it's very rare that I'm poorly or I have to go to bed. And with COVID, I had to go to bed twice for 2 weeks, and I was quite seriously poorly with it. And I just thought, you know what? I should follow what I always say to people. Remember what your rules of success are, what you're passionate about, and you do more and you enjoy more and you get more rewards, no matter how hard you're working. If it's something that you love, that you should follow that where you have the opportunity to. So the decision came to wind down Astute, but I have managed to take a couple of the clients across with me to Waddington CBE. And now what's great about it, like I say, I've got my website because I work within the business marketplace, but also work very specifically with a creative agency through Waddington CBE, which is, Stephen's real passion and where he loves to be the most. And obviously he's hugely experienced. He's grown and sold businesses and all sorts. So it's great. So he learns from me and I learn from him. He really loves startups. I really love established businesses. So it's kind of like a really nice, nice position to be in. And in terms of how do we do it, I think we've always had a healthy interest in what each other is doing. We turn to each other for advice, or I've edited his blog for as long as I can possibly remember. And obviously we also have we used to have very healthy lines in terms of clients. So like if we've got clients where there could be a conflict, that's kept completely separately, and we just don't talk about that stuff, and we work in completely different spaces. But we enjoy what we do, and we were always that couple whereby it didn't matter if it was social time or work time. It will come up in conversation, or I'll say, oh, did you see that piece in that? Or I've seen this course, or something will be on TV and we'll talk about the implications of that. So we're that awful, annoying couple where it doesn't really interfere.
Well, that's what I was interested by. Do you ever switch off? Like, for both being very senior communicators, do you ever just not?
We've got 5 kids between us. You absolutely have to switch off. You have to be completely grounded, and we're led by them, to be honest. But I think what's interesting is that we don't have a set day, so it's that we don't work formal days. We do what we need to do every day, and that's a mishmash of everything, and I think that works for us. So I had to learn, when I first set my business up, I'd been very indoctrinated into the very classic 9 to 5:30. Actually, it was usually 8 till God knows 8 o'clock again when I was working in the last agency I was at. But it took me a long time to unlearn that to suit me and my family. And I set it up as a lifestyle family when I was working at Astute to do just that. And so to answer that question, we are kept very grounded by the kids. So I've got 2 kids, Stephen's got 3. The 2 girls are independent now, which is great. But we both co-parent, and ultimately the most important thing at the start and end of every single day is them. So when we have them, they get almost full attention. We do our very best. It doesn't always work out that way. And we build things around that to suit. So that tends to be a lot of the chat. I've got 2 boys, and he's got Dan, and being surrounded by 4 boys, a lot of the conversation is dominated by the food or sport, or washing, because we seem to have a huge amount of washing. So actually, it's a mix of that and did you see this on the TV and chit chat. Although last night we did sit down and watch Celebrity, going, what the hell is Matt Hancock doing on here?
Oh, don't. So I want to get on to some of the honours you've received. So, the key one, of course, being honoured with a CBE in 2021, presented to you by what would have been the Prince of Wales then, but is now, of course, King Charles III. That must have been a really proud moment for you. What was that experience like?
It's even now, it feels a bit surreal and a little bit like, oh, can you believe it? I've got a picture of it here, actually. It's just about me meeting the actual
I'm not surprised. Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm just really grateful to everybody who thought that I was appropriate to be put forward for that honour. So I didn't know about it, genuinely didn't know about it. And you'll be aware that we had a troll for quite a long time, and we've still got a case ongoing with the Met. And one Thursday, I was sat and I was trying to finish my work up, and an email popped in. It was about 6:15 or something, and it had something bizarre on, like some birthday on 2021. And I thought, oh, and it's like, even now I still interrogate things, because I used to get a lot of nonsense. So I was shouting, oh, here we go again. And Stephen's in the kitchen cooking, and he was like, what's wrong? And then I opened it up and literally nearly fell off my seat. And then, so he's giggling away because he knew about it. And so I took the MacBook and I was like, look at this. And then we looked through the letter, and then he couldn't believe it, because obviously it said CBE, and that's quite unusual. I mean, we were both flabbergasted at that point, and then he dropped the MacBook. He nearly burnt the stir fry. But it was just amazing. So firstly, like I say, it's surreal, but I'm so grateful for people who provided letters of support. And I'm very lucky in that I've been able to do some things that I've really loved. So I worked with the Sunshine Fund for a long time, which is a really important charity in the Northeast, helping kids with disabilities. And you really get an insight into how different and difficult people's lives are when you work with a charity like that. And I was a privilege as a trustee to be able to help increase the income they were generating. And then thanks to, it was Lorna Branton, actually, who introduced me, I ended up on a panel for the NHS organ donation changes, which received royal assent to become opt-in. So basically everybody now is eligible to give donations, unless you specifically say you don't want to. And so that law changed, which was something really important to me, because my sister died when I was 17 and she was 15, and she was in a road accident, and there was very little we could donate, but we did donate what we could. So when I had the opportunity to do that, it was a very personal cause for me. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And of course, there's been a number of different things that I've spent an awful lot of time volunteering through the CIPR and the social mobility space. So I still find it mind blowing. But it's really special. It does mean an awful lot to me. And I know there are issues with it's links to the empire, and I think that those do need to be addressed, but equally I am proud to have that, and it will always be something that means an awful lot to me.
I'm sorry to hear about your sister. Did the loss of her at such a young age kind of have an influence in terms of what you ended up doing career-wise, and you're kind of being so drawn to this charity work?
I think it's an interesting one. I don't think you ever get over a loss like that. It's interesting because one of my really good friends has just lost her husband to suicide, and it's bringing back an awful lot of those emotions at the moment. It's his funeral tomorrow. I think what it does is remind you that life is really short, and I really believe in grabbing it with both hands and doing what you can, and being thoughtful and meaningful about everything you do. And I think that's probably where some of the work drive comes from. I've been estranged from my dad as well for quite a long time, from being a teenager. And I think, these are really personal and impactful things that leave an indelible mark on who you are and what your personality is like, and you fill those gaps. So I definitely think there was a grief there, that work helped deal with. So yeah, there is an element of that. And also, my mum has always been a really good role model. I didn't always appreciate it or love it at the time, but when I was younger, there was always, particularly before my mum and dad divorced, there was always people around the house where she was helping, and it was very clear that she had a role in her community whereby if someone needed something, it was our door they would knock on. And I think, it might not have always been convenient for me as a kid because mum's attention was elsewhere, helping
Sure.
someone. But actually, that's also a good message in terms of, what's important. And I think that sticks with you. And Stephen has very similar values. I was always drawn to his generosity and openness. We get approached by a lot of people and we do what we can. Sometimes it's not always possible, depending what the ask is, to help, but we do our very best, or we'll signpost. And I think that, if everybody was like that, the world would be a very different place.
Yeah, absolutely. As part of that, you describe yourself as an activist today. That's a very key kind of term for you, but it's also a very charged term. What does it mean to you specifically, Sarah?
Well, for me, it's a good question. And when you mentioned you want to ask that question, I thought about it, and I hadn't considered it from that point of view. So it was really quite thought provoking. But for me, it means that you live on your terms, and if you have certain values, you live those. I was really quite fascinated by Joe Lycett's recent video, which obviously is challenging David Beckham about his role in Qatar and the money that he's earning from that. And I just thought, that was a really brave move, but he doesn't stand by the sidelines. And I've always been one of these people, and it was one of the reasons I got involved with the CIPR. You can't stand and bitch by the sidelines without doing something. Now, I'm fully aware that not everybody likes the fact that I'm quite mouthy, that I'm northern, that I'm female. I don't always get it right. I know that, but you know what? I'm always prepared to try and understand where I've got it wrong, put my hand up and say, okay, I fucked that up, or okay, I'll amend that for next time. I've never been frightened of doing that. And hopefully I always will be big enough to be that person. No, we all need to learn. We all fail and need to fail forward, as the Google thing goes. But I think for me, it's about saying, okay, you use your voice and your influence where you can. And like with Socially Mobile, if you knock on all the doors and you still get a no, if you're able, you go that step further and you make it happen. So that, for me, is what it means to me. I appreciate it might mean different things to other people. And I appreciate there are lots of activists that people don't like their methods of doing stuff. But the other thing I would say is not everybody gets it right, but actually there's also a real discomfort with change. And I've been through that quite a lot, particularly in learning about racism and bias and my approach to stuff. And, if you do put your head on the parapet with those things, you become a very easy target, and you just have to be prepared to say, right, I get that. Take a deep breath and go again. And, people who are reasonable will hopefully see by your actions and your efforts that you are trying to take things in the right direction. But it's not easy. And like I say, particularly the ethnicity can get a very charged debate around it. And I find that difficult sometimes, because I really want to listen and understand, and I'm a bit of a solutions provider, and sometimes you can't always do that, and sometimes it's not your place to have an opinion either, and that's been something I've really had to learn and work very hard at. It's not always right for me to step in and have a opinion.
Do you think it's learned behavior is why people are so averse to, or why some people are so averse to change? Do you think it's what you learn as a child and what you've absorbed, or do you think just as societies we're uncomfortable with disrupting the status quo?
What's great about education today is that my boys are learning about stuff in school, not as widespread as I'd like, but we're still certainly trying to supplement what they're getting through their school, secondary and junior, respectively. And we've got books in the house, for example, Noughts and Crosses and My Brother's Name is Jessica. And these are all great ways to debate about things that, might not otherwise come up in conversation, and open conversations about things like consent, about the trans debate, about how we're thoughtful about other people, doesn't matter where they're from, their ethnicity, their background, just the differences amongst us, but also what we have in common, because ultimately that's what it comes down to, isn't it? What we all have in common, and maintaining our humanity even in the most challenging circumstances, and even when those nuanced, difficult debates get very challenging, and they do. And sometimes I have to step out because I feel anxious, or I find it too antagonistic, or I feel unable to contribute in a constructive fashion, or I don't know enough. And I think it's fine sometimes to say that. And again, going back to what I said earlier, also sometimes admitting that you got that wrong, or yes, you need to work on that area. And I think if we all again took that approach, life would be better again.
Absolutely. You were talking earlier about the difficult time that we've had as a society, as an industry for the last few years, and particularly how within our sector, PR agencies have not really bounced back, and now we're on the cusp of a recession. I'm interested from your perspective. Do you think that the role of public relations and the reputation of PR has improved in recent years, particularly in regards to the role that many comms professionals played to guide organisations through those choppy waters of the pandemic?
I think the role of public relations has been elevated. Do I think we can maintain that? Not necessarily, and we can't take it for granted. I think one of my big issues is about PR practitioner skill set. And the reason I created Future Proof, a community that I run, which is a little bit quieter these days, admittedly, but we have a community with social media presence, and we published, I'm looking behind me because there's 6 books in the series.
Yeah, I've read those, yeah.
All contributor led. So again, I'm grateful because it's a team effort. But that was about looking at the value that we bring to organizations and what that means. And I felt very strongly that over time, I'm not quite sure how it happened, but rather than inhabiting the strategic role that we'd initially have, and if you go back to the CIPR almost 75 years ago when it was founded, these were big, heavy hitters who did it, who understood the importance of engaging with stakeholders in the way that we should, but they had the business knowledge and management skills to be able to do that. I felt that we moved away from that into a much more tactical role, and often we were seen to be delivery function, and that we would kind of do as we were told rather than challenge and ask that very important why question. And so for me, this again comes back to that in terms of, for me, this is about continuous professional development and being able to do that strategic role, which is much more about understanding business management, understanding organizations, understanding leadership, making sure that the business objectives are appropriate. Now, our natural role should be all about helping define purpose, helping embed that, understanding and embedding the mission, vision, and values, making sure that organizations are living those values. And obviously that's a very strong internal communications role, but it's not something necessarily that everybody's doing day to day. There's still kind of this obsession with media relations, that the whole peso model has taken off to a certain extent, but it's not across everything. I'm talking to different agencies. I'm always quite fascinated by what they do and where. And it's interesting that I sometimes find more generalist agencies, more in the regions, tend to be have a more integrated approach, shall we say, because they have to do more and they've had to diversify, or whether they've just better understood the opportunity that comes with that. But public sector do it really quite well. They tend to be able to advise upwards to board and have a slightly more equal relationship. We shouldn't be servant master. We should be, if not equals, feeding into management teams and making sure that we're equipped, because we've got the skill set to do the horizon scanning, to gather the right data and insight, to interpret that, to provide that information in a meaningful way. And so I guess the answer to the question, which was very long-winded, was we certainly were brought to the forefront, and we needed to be there during the pandemic. We need to continue to occupy that space, but that takes thought, that takes effort, and the onus is on us to do that, and our industry bodies to lead the way in that respect, so we understand what our role is in demonstrating value to organizations. And it's interesting because right now I'm a volunteer with the IOD, and I'm an ambassador, but also a branch chair in the Northeast. And I'm actually doing a standalone project, which is actually asking directors what they understand PR to be and what it delivers. So I'm looking forward to getting the results of that survey. But at the back of it is also a guide to employing PR to get the most effective and strategic use from it. And it's just really about, like I say, reasserting public relations as a management function. And hopefully that will help aid knowledge and increase procurement of public relations practitioners too. I'll put my teeth back in.
And also, of course, part and parcel of that is making sure with the work you're doing with Socially Mobile is making sure that actually we've got a representative future pool of PR practitioners that can properly guide the publics by being representative of those publics. And inherently there is the issue currently. Yeah,
100%. I mean, there's nothing to disagree with that statement.
One other thing you mentioned earlier, you talked about being trolled, and I know that's an ongoing investigation that we won't cover, but I am curious whether being trolled and have that kind of experience on social media has impacted your love and joy of being on social. I know you and Stephen are both very social folk in that sense of the word, but has it changed your relationship a bit and made you a bit more guarded?
With the advent of time, I'm probably back out there almost as much as I was before. There was a little while where actually our lives felt very small because we closed down. We not Twitter so much or LinkedIn, but I have a personal account on Insta that I keep very much for personal. I want to have my space where that's where I go post pictures of my family, whatever I'm doing. I don't use it to promote anything. I don't really want to see loads of sales stuff on there, apart from perhaps accounts that I'm following because I like them. So on Insta, there was definitely a period where I called lots of people because we knew that the troll was someone who knew us quite well and that we considered to be a friend because of the nature of the abuse we were getting and the level of detail that this person had. And and so that was difficult. And it became a point where you would look at absolutely everything. So we've got a camper van business, and we get time waster emails for that. We get Socially Mobile time waster emails, so pretending to be applicants. And so you'd spend an awful lot of time and energy, which is exhausting, just looking at stuff 3 times. And there's usually a giveaway. So the person would use certain language because they want you to know that it's them, or certain names, or often they would use, which struck me as a strange almost element of racism, they'd use a picture of a black person with a profile in America. So you'd look at that and you Google, and it would be strange. It was a strange approach to the way they do that. I remember when we were a bit more public about it, when we were right in the middle of it, the actual abuse, of which we had significant abuse over a good period of 10 months. People were saying, oh, well, you're very open, you share too much on social. And that struck me a little bit of victim blaming. I was a bit like, I'm entitled to say what I want. It's not my fault that someone has taken a dislike to us for whatever reason and it feels obliged to break the law by targeting us. And it wasn't just stuff that was online. We got stuff sent to the house, and people will know that we have a houseboat in London which doubles up as a home and an office. And this person tried to ensure that our mooring was taken away. The person wrote to the council to say that we didn't want to live there anymore, and could they release the mooring, which could have lost us our home.
Yeah, of course.
Thankfully that didn't, and that was obviously a great example of fraud. No, I don't think it has. I think it reminded me that I am a bit naive sometimes, as I'm one of those people that looks for the best in people. There's very few people I don't like, and there's very few people I actively dislike. It's very unusual. And I can think of probably 2 people that for whatever reason, just don't get on with. But I'm not like that. I'm a very typical Aries. I'm full in, I'm all in there. It's like, I think you ask my kids, if I get cross, it'll be a flash in the pan. I'll shout at them. It's done. I don't think about it again. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a grudge holder. And with social, I don't know. Stephen and I only know how it'll be us. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the other thing. Like once we got into the police stage, and there was a decrease in the amount of the trolling, and at that point started to breathe a bit easier, and all we ever really wanted was it for it to go away. Now, knowing the person and knowing the incompetence of the Met, which is why there's investigations still underway and we can't say very much, it's just been really frustrating, because my view is I don't want this person doing it to others, and I'm pretty confident, knowing what we know and having uncovered a network of other people have been trolled by the same person, that this will be continuous behavior. But that's not in my control now. So I guess the answer is it really caught us up short. It made us very distrustful for a while, but if you live like that, it makes you a very unhappy and bitter person, and we refused for that to be the legacy of what happened to us when it wasn't our fault, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's clear from kind of seeing the activity from you both that you're a really joyous family, that you really just celebrate life and are living it richly, and nor should anyone stop you doing that. So I really
we're
hope
lucky, Steve and I both in our second marriages, we've got 5 kids who are wonderful kids who work hard as well, and we're really proud of. And our exes are doing well, and we have good relationships with them both, and that's really important in terms of ultimately at the end of the day, it's about each other, and that's all you've got, and looking out for each other. And this person, for whatever reason, is obviously deeply unhappy. I don't completely excuse the behavior. The police officer who initially held our case was very clear that she felt this wasn't just a mental health issue. This was also, there was more to it, and clearly there's a pattern of behavior. But when you come down to it, hopefully we are, well, I hope people see that we're authentic on social. Like I said, I don't know how to be. Sometimes people like it, some people don't. And it took me a long time when I was younger, in my 20s, to realize that I wasn't going to be everybody's cup of tea. But that's absolutely fine.
Do you know what I've realized in the last 2 years, during and since the pandemic, is that you can only really be you, and actually social media only actually works and has any point whatsoever if you're you. And I've seen a real sea change in the last 2 years in terms of how people interact with me and relate to me, which is ironically, or maybe not ironically, fed into an increase in work for me too.
That's
because
exactly
people
what happens,
because people have seen this is just me now. This is not me working for a company.
But it's you and your values. So people buy into that. And I can give you a brilliant example of that. So a couple of years back, I went viral, not just in the UK, but right around the globe, because I had a view on the way fairy tales are taught in school. It was misrepresented. I stand by my comment, which was that, long and short of it, I felt like there was a real place for fairy tales in schools, to have a great place in teaching about safety and consent and things. But the book that I'd had wasn't very appropriate. Anyway, of course I tweeted about it, and it caught fire, and I'm not kidding, front page of papers in Australia, Denmark, you name it. And of course Piers Morgan blamed me and all sorts. It was big, it felt massive. And at the time, thankfully, I was on the boat with Stephen's kids, who kept me really grounded. And I was like, at that point, fairly new to the family, thinking, oh God, I've fucked up my relationship now with, my kids were younger, so it wasn't so relevant. But I just thought, oh, how are they're going to be so embarrassed of me? And they weren't. They were hugely supportive and kept me very grounded. But the point is, I thought it would also have destroyed my business. And I thought, oh my God, people are never going to want to work with me again. And actually what happened was, yes, there were some people who went, oh, you're ridiculous, stupid feminist, blah, 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 all the abuse that you would normally get. But actually, a huge amount of people who said, not sure I agree with you, because I'm not sure how you've been represented, but I'm on your side. And then a huge swell of people who went, right with you, and then who opted in to, procure me for business. It was actually quite a defining moment, in a way that I had never anticipated. And actually, to come back to your question about the trolling and how am I on social media, I think having been through that hugely, what felt like at the time, very shameful, very public moment, I think there's very little, oh God, I shouldn't say that because that's just jinxing myself, but you learn to live with it and understand it better. And yes, you're mindful of it, but once you've done it, like it was hard. And so once you've done it, you've got a few battle scars and they give you a bit of protection. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, the last thing I wanted to ask was really kind of, you've had this very prolific, career so far, and you're clearly not going to stop learning. But what mountains are you still keen to climb, either by yourself or with Stephen and your family by your side?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's something I'm working on and it takes time. So I'm in this kind of strange transition from having closed the business, joining Wads Inc., developing my role with the IOD. But the thing that really sings to me is this social mobility piece. And I'm in the middle of doing a number of different meetings with different organizations and different people who are doing amazing work in this space, just to find out more, develop my own understanding and look for where I could be well placed to help to use my influence or my knowledge to help others. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I have a couple of lofty secret aims that I'm not going to share, but yeah, so this is a bit of a fact-finding time, but that's the space. I really believe in opportunity for all, and that's kind of where I'm moving forward. And you can't do it quickly, and actually I can't go any faster than I'm going. I feel like I'm doing it at a pace that's manageable. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm kind of like, I really, once I decide on something, I really want to do it and I want to do it now. And actually it's probably quite good. I'm at the mercy of the people and when they're free. And obviously I'm grateful just to get in front of them. And also what I want to do is something quite meaningful. And I think you've got to get that right. And some of those times, sometimes it takes a long time to build that path. So I'm just at the very start of that journey, but yeah, I think more in the social mobility stuff, not taking me away from my non-exec director work. I love that, both with the business community, but particularly in the creative industries, because that's where my heart's always been. But yeah, I feel like there's something more I can do.
And last thing I want to ask, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe just thinking of entering the PR industry?
Oh, that's always a tough one. And I think it goes back to, let's go full circle. Think about what your measures of success are. What do you want and need to get out of your career? So I think there's always, like, you've got to remember that there's a contract with the organization that you work for. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about this kind of imbalance between employers and employees, and demands from employees and high salaries because the talent market's been really hot. And my view would be, think about what you want out of it and really think about finding a place that you can work where you have matching values, because that will really matter. It means that you're much more likely to get the reward that you want, the work and circumstances that you want. And even if you haven't quite got the salary that you're aspiring to, you're probably going to have that offset by just the environment that you're in and great relationships. Ultimately, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is such a good basis to start from, because sometimes at the moment, go back to the socially mobile survey, you've got people who just need the job because at the moment they really need to pay their bills, which means it's very difficult for them to think about anything else. But ultimately, we're also going to the workplace, whether that's virtual or hybrid or full-time, because we want company and we want the tacit knowledge transfer that you get from that, and just the enjoyment. And actually, in the creative industry, my argument is that is quite important. I have no issue with kind of like flexible working patterns, but I do think as an agency, as you get bigger, or a PR team or creative team, that face-to-face contact is invaluable. And when you're a boss and it suits you to work from home and you've got a nice place to work from, you've still got to think about everybody else, because not everybody else's circumstances are the same. So find an employer with similar values where you feel you can thrive, and also don't let it bleed out. If it's not working for you, move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today, Sarah. I could speak to you all day about this, but one thing I would like to know, as we kind of keep following your journey, how can our listeners keep up with your latest news? And also, where should they go to find out more about Socially Mobile?
Sure, thank you for asking that. So I'm quite noisy on Twitter, so that's Mrs._Wads. Socially Mobile is sociallymobile.org.uk. It's also got its own Twitter handle, so we'll post updates on there. But basically, if you want all the info and to see when the next cohorts are open, 695 for a paid place. Obviously, we've got fully funded places as well, and we're open now for applications for early January. So take a look at that. I'm also on LinkedIn, and a good place to be, particularly if you're in the creative sector, is wads.co.uk. And we do quite a lot of data gathering and insights. So occasionally we will publish a policy paper or some kind of report that we hope is helpful to people. And we've got one at the moment about strategic planning and resilience, which is quite important as we are entering, looks like we're at the start of what's going to be quite a long-ranging recession. And obviously we've had quite a lot of political and economic turbulence. So that's just there to help act as a guide and as a basis for people to do their own planning with.
Well, great. We'll also put everything in the show notes as well at the end of this podcast. So that wraps us up for today. Thanks so much for your time to my brilliant guest, Sarah Waddington CBE. Do check out Sarah's work and everything that's happening over at Socially Mobile. It's fantastic to see. If you've liked the show today, then it would be great if you could give us a nice rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And don't forget, you can also subscribe to us on YouTube and let us know what you think via the hashtag GoodJourneysPod. All episodes can also be found on our website, which is secondmountaincoms.co.uk/podcast. So thank you for joining us today. This has been the Good Journeys with Second Mountain podcast. So until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again soon.